Hello everyone, my name is Mohammad Adil Khan and today we are going to dive into the concept of free on board contracts or FOB contracts, a vital component of international trade. By the end of this session, you will all have a clear understanding of what FOB contracts entail, the duties of buyers and sellers, relevant legal principles, available remedies, and their advantages and disadvantages. Let's start with the definition. An FOB contract is a type of shipping agreement where the seller fulfills their obligations once the goods are loaded onto the designated shipping vessel at the agreed port. At this point, the buyer assumes all risks and responsibilities for the goods. The transfer of the risk is what makes FOB contracts unique and widely used in the trade agreements. Now, moving to the key duties of parties involved. In international trade, the responsibilities of the seller and the buyer are well defined to ensure the smooth transfer for goods and adherence to contractual terms. Each party has distinct duties that must be fulfilled to complete transaction effectively. For the seller, their primary obligation is to ensure the goods are delivered to the designated port and loaded onto the agreed shipping vessel. For example, if a seller is shipping machinery from Germany to China, they must ensure the machinery is safely transported to the port and loaded onto the vessel designated by buyer. Additionally, the goods must conform to the terms specified in the contract. If the contract specifies a particular brand, quantity, or standard, the seller must meet these requirements. For instance, if the agreement specifies delivery of Model X smartphones, providing Model Y would constitute a breach of contract. Seller must also provide crucial shipping documents such as the bills of lading and invoice. These documents serve a proof of delivery and allow the buyer to claim ownership of the goods. Without these documents, the buyer might face difficulties in custom clearance or legal ownership disputes. On the other hand, the buyer also have a significant responsibilities. They are primarily required to arrange and pay for shipping vessels that will transport for the goods. For example, if a buyer in India is importing textile products from Turkey, it is their responsibility to hire a shipping company to handle the transportation. Once the goods are loaded onto the vessel, the risk of loss or damage transfers to the buyer. This means that if the goods are damaged during the transit due to rough seas, the buyer must bear the financial consequences. Lastly, the buyer must pay for the goods according to agreed terms in the contract. For example, if a payment terms specify that the buyer must pay within 30 days of receiving the invoice, the buyer must adhere to this timeline to avoid legal disputes or penalties. Now, let's discuss the legal framework and key cases that provide clarity on free on board F contracts often used in international trade. Number 1, Bahrain versus India Navigation Co. Limited 1954. This case sets a precedent that under FOB terms, the seller's responsibilities include loading the goods onto the buyer's nominated ship. For example, if a seller in the UK agrees to ship machinery to a buyer in India under FOB contracts, the seller must ensure the machinery is properly loaded on the ship. If the seller fails to do so, they may be held liable for the breach of contract. Number 2, Bungie Corp versus TradeX SA 1981. This case emphasizes the importance of uh, strict adherence to delivery deadlines and the requirements to provide proper notice. For example, a wheat exporter in the US shipping to a buyer in France must give clear notice of when the goods will be loaded. Missing the deadline or failing to notify could result in the buyer rejecting the shipment or claiming damages. FOB contracts and Incoterms Rules 2020. These rules, developed by the International Chamber of Commerce (ICC), define the obligations of buyers and sellers in FOB contracts. For instance, they clarify the seller must deliver the goods, clear them for export, and load them onto the buyer's vessels, while the buyer assumes all risk once the goods are loaded. For example, a furniture manufacturer in Vietnam exporting to Australia under FOB terms must load the furniture on the ship and ensure export clearance. From the point, the Australian buyer assumes responsibility for the shipping and import costs. There was a supplementary legislation, Sales of Goods Act 1979 in the UK. This act complements FOB contracts by ensuring fairness and clarity. For example, it implies that goods must be of satisfactory quality and fit for purpose, even in FOB agreements. If a seller ships substandard goods under a FOB contract, the buyer can claim breach of implied terms under the Act, even if the buyer assumes risks after loading. Now let's explore remedies available under FOB contracts for buyers and sellers. FOB contracts outline specific remedies for both buyers and sellers in cases where obligations are not met. These remedies are designed to ensure fairness and legal resources in the international trade. Buyer's remedies. When goods delivered under FOB contract fail to conform to agreed specifications such as quality, quantity, or descriptions, buyers have several options. For example, rejection of goods. Buyers can reject non-conforming goods. For instance, if a buyer orders 1,000 units of electronic components but receives defective or mismatched items, they are entitled to refuse acceptance. Number two, claiming damages. Buyers can claim the compensation for losses incurred during the breach. For example, if the non-conforming goods lead to production delays or loss of businesses, buyers can sue for financial damages to cover the losses. These remedies protects buyers from financial or operational harm caused by the non-compliance with contract terms. Now moving on to the seller's remedies. Sellers also have safeguards under FOB contracts, one of which is claiming payment. If the goods are delivered as per the contract but the buyer fails to pay, the seller can demand payment. For instance, a seller shipping textiles may claim the agreed payment once the goods are loaded onto the buyer's vessel. Recovering damages. If the buyer breaches their obligations, for example, failing to provide a vessel for shipping or refusing delivery without valid reason, the seller can recover associated losses. For example, a seller forced to store goods due to buyer's failure to arrange timely shipping can claim the compensation for storage costs and other related expenses. There are some advantages and some disadvantages of FOB contracts. One of the advantages is that clear division of responsibilities. FOB terms clearly define when the risk transfer from the seller to the buyer. Other advantage is legal framework. FOB contracts are supported by well-established laws. Disadvantages include buyer's risks, complexity in shipping arrangements. To conclude my talk, FOB contracts are vital instruments in global trading, offering a structured approach to transferring risks and responsibilities between buyers and sellers. By clearly delineating duties and remedies, they promote fairness and predictability. However, successful use of FOB terms requires a thorough understanding of the associated legal obligations, risks, and procedural complexities. Whether you are a buyer seeking to protect against defective goods or a seller aiming to ensure timely payment, mastering FOB principles can significantly enhance your your ability to navigate international commerce effectively. Thank you very much.